Come be a part of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics with your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. Hear the voices of liberty speaking all across America. Doc Holliday provides thought-provoking interviews and commentary about the issues and actions that are afflicting this country and what we need to do to get America back on track. Get fired up, get inspired, get on board with Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right now.
And here we go.
Hey, once again, that's the sound of rock cracking. You've got Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right here on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Holliday, and we're glad to have everybody listening to us because we are in the midst of this Democratic nomination for president, and it's getting wild and woolly out there. And this week, we are going to finish our conversation, our interview we had with Daphne Barak, about Roger Stone, General Flynn, Rick Gates, and more. So we're going to finish up that interview, and then we'll talk some about the last Democratic debate before Super Tuesday this week. It was crazy last week in the South Carolina debate, and we're going to talk some about that, play a little clip on the second half of the show. But let's get started with, we had a part in our conversation where Daphne Barak was going to tell us what Rick Gates had to say, and a funny story about Mitt Romney and President Trump. We're going to let her tell that story now, and then we will get in more of the interview where we touch base about General Flynn. Rick Gates is the story. And if you missed last week's show, go back and listen to the show, because one of the most fascinating interviews we've had is with Daphne Barak. She wrote a book called To Plea or Not to Plea. Now, that's the story about Rick Gates, who got caught up in this Robert Mueller probe and had to plead and work with the government to be a witness against Paul Manafort and others. So, very interesting book, and you can get it on Amazon, and go right there and check out Amazon for To Plea or Not to Plea by Daphne Barak. Now, let's get right in. She was about to tell a story last week that is detailed a little more than what was in her book about Rick Gates, and this is what Rick had to say about President Trump and Mitt Romney. Before I go on I do want to talk about General Flynn, but there's one part in your book, Rick Gates, talking about Romney. Now, you had this book. It was finished in late 2019. I don't know when it came out, but it was way before the impeachment. Nobody knew how the trial in the Senate was going to go. And I found this quote. I think it's on around page 124 or something. And Rick Gates was saying, and let me quote what Rick Gates said that you wrote in your book. I felt that Trump and Romney were not yet through. They'd get back in the ring in the near future, either to cement some lost understanding or to continue their rivalry round after round.
Exactly.
Unquote.
Yeah. Don't you feel in politics, it's always the same players somehow? Even Bloomberg wants to bring Hillary and all that. I mean, it's like
it's unbelievable how
all the same players, and even if it's new names, they are being handled by the same players, right?
Yeah, and you think Romney was out of the picture forever or anything, and he comes back as Senate, and then he's the only Republican that votes against Trump in the trial, the impeachment trial in the Senate, and it's just, and Trump calls him a loser again, and that's and he is, he missed the presidency.
There's a very funny story about Romney. I'll share with your listeners, right?
Yeah, please do.
I love to laugh.
Okay, we do too on this show.
Right? Okay, you tell me when you're ready, my dear.
Yeah, I'm ready. Tell us a story about Romney.
There's a very funny story that Rick Gates is telling us about Mitt Romney, and it maybe sheds light about how personal this hatred has become, right? Because,
okay.
Basically, we know that Donald Trump did endorse Romney in 2012, And then, of course, Romney went against him, said he was a fraud, a cordman, whatever, right? At Trump University, whatever. But at one point, it became so personal, as you see right now. So Rick Gates is actually revealing in my book, To Plea or Not to Plea, the story of Rick Gates and the Trump and the Mueller investigation, a very personal, funny, hilarious story, which sheds a light about their ongoing hatred. So at one point when Donald Trump nailed all the, delegates to be the nominee of the RNC in 2016.
Right.
Ryan Priebus, then the RNC chairman, suggested, why won't we make peace with everybody? A good idea, right? And believe it or not, some people who hate Donald Trump would not believe it, but Donald Trump thought it was a good idea. He really wanted to unite everybody behind him, right?
Right.
So they decided that Donald Trump should reach out to Mitt Romney, who was sort of the head of the Trump haters, right?
Yeah, never Trumpers.
This is before the convention in Cleveland that Bill Ganassi, my husband, and I were two of the top delegates of California for Donald Trump. So we were there. We didn't know what was going on behind the scene, right? So basically, Rick Gates is saying that Donald Trump agreed to reach out to Mitt Romney just before. Then he called Rick Gates, and he said, okay, give me Mitt Romney's mobile. Rick Gates, knowing what's going on, said, well, Mr. Trump, but do you have the talking points because you don't want to be rejected, right?
Yeah.
So Donald, and the one thing none of us wants to be is to be rejected, let alone Donald Trump, right? So basically he says, well, let me call you in a few hours. A few hours later, Donald Trump called Rick Gates. Okay, Rick, give me Mitt Romney's mobile. I said, oh, good. Right now, you have the talking points. You know what, Rick? I'm going to send him an email. Okay. So that's
they won't talk.
Right?
Okay.
So they work on an email for a while because it has to be an email that if the Romney's people leak, it should not look like Donald is begging or everything, right? So it should be very, generic, casual, right? On the other end, Rick is going back and forth to get with Romney's assistant to get Romney's personal email, right? They get Romney's personal email, and they finish the draft of this funny email, and then basically they go to Donald. Everything is good. Boom. They have a big problem. Donald Trump doesn't have a personal email.
Oh, that's right. Trump does not use emails, what I've always heard.
All right. So now they have a big problem. So after all these 3-4 days, they send this very personal email from Donald Trump to Mitt Romney from Hope Hicks' email, right?
Oh, from Hope Hicks' email. Okay.
Could you imagine Romney getting this email from a secretary, with all due respect, right?
Yeah.
So you cannot judge Romney not to answer, right? He doesn't answer that Donald Trump feels is being rejected, and then the rest is history, right?
Yeah.
He said, I don't want any Mitt Romney in the convention and everything, but only because he didn't have a personal email.
He didn't have his email, and Romney wouldn't answer back to Hope Hicks, so that was.
Would you?
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
right.
love Hope to death, but would I mean, come on,
I know it, but it's just funny because they never shook hands or tried to get together because they couldn't communicate.
Yeah, but it was well meant,
Yeah. And that was just before the convention then.
And then Donald Trump said, I don't want him in the convention. I don't want anything, whatever. Then he really went ballistic because he felt rejected. But frankly, not rightly so, because if you want to talk to me, don't send your secretary to send me an email, right?
Yeah. So it was And Rick Gates was right in the middle of all that, wasn't he?
He was in the middle of everything. And by the way, I love Hope Hicks. She's beautiful, so everything. But still, you and I talk directly. Our secretaries talk directly. Our attorneys talk one-to-one. You know protocol, right?
Yeah.
Especially, it's not between friends. It's between enemies. You have to establish it right.
Yeah,
right?
Go right through that protocol. Yep, very important. But I like that funny story, and our listeners do too. One of the things that I did want to talk to you about General Flynn, and one reason because, like I said, your life partner, Bill, we've had him on our show. We want to get him on again, but he knows so much about Turkey because, that's where he's from. He's Turk. And
oh, my God, Bill is so big right now. Bill, my husband, Bill Ganasti, is the front pages of the biggest newspapers in Turkey, and Donald Trump took his advance book and congratulated him, and Pompeo is so proud of him, and he's becoming right now the number one voice about U.S. and Turkey, and of course Iran and Syria and all this wonderful area in Libya.
Right.
And I'm so proud of him, and I would love you to have him on the show.
Yeah, we've had him on before.
A huge role in the administration when he's finishing promoting the book in a few weeks, and of course you'll have him.
Yeah, we'll have him on again, but he's so knowledgeable.
About Flynn, I have to tell you, by the way, I want to tell you one thing, Ed, and I may surprise some people. None of these people that I support have been a Snow White. Are we clear?
Okay.
Not Manafort because he is not, he's not. He has a problem with tax evasion.
Yeah, he's not pure. We know that.
Money and all that.
He was
same
guilty.
Same thing. Rick Gates, Michael Flynn, what he did with Turkey. Come on, to get $500,000 for an article to support a cleric just because you are becoming the NSA. It's so crazy. It's so corrupt.
Well, see, that's why I wanted to ask you about that.
No, hold on. None of these people are good people. However, they're all very bad people. However, none of these scenes would be more like than a $2-3 million punishment or half a year probation or whatever, or 3 months in jail. No headlines. And maybe, as you know, the FBI did start to investigate Paul Manafort and decided they didn't have much interest until 2 years later when he became the campaign manager of Donald Trump. So what I'm saying is
Daphne,
nobody said there's Snow Whites.
Well, let me ask you, I'm just throwing this out. They said the FBI investigated back, 3 or 4 years before 2016 and decided not to do anything. We know the FBI, they had one FBI agent who, just pure out lied and turned on Carter Page talking about, said he had no connection to CIA when he did. And so if the FBI lied about that, how are we to trust them when they said they had already looked at Manafort in 2013 and decided not to do anything? How do we know that some agent didn't go back and say they did that, and they never looked at it until they got details from the Ukraine? Is that a possibility, or is that just far-fetched?
Everything is a possibility. I think what we just learned right now, people used to believe that FBI, CIA, whatever is above. I'm filming right now a huge film with the biggest Hollywood stars as of next month. Be released before 2020 elections. And if you just look at one of them, Clint Eastwood movie, Richard Jewell, which is a great movie, it shows you that 2 decades ago, the FBI just decided they had a conclusion before they even knew what the investigation is about, and they were about to charge a guy that had nothing to do with this. They were about to ruin his life, put him in jail, put the lock on out, and thank God there was an attorney who was willing to fight for it. And I think the narrative that FBI or CIA anything they're above law, no. There are people with agendas, and they should be investigated like the people they investigate. And I think I want to applaud Donald Trump for. It doesn't say that you have to vilify them or say anything they're doing is bad. No, I didn't say that. There are many good people there, but there are few rotten apples, and we have to look at it.
Well, as Daphne said, a few rotten apples, and nobody, like she said, nobody's Snow White. We're talking about Paul Manafort. You know, he broke the law. He's had to pay a long prison sentence, longer than what some might think should be necessary. And I go back. How do we know the FBI didn't go get the information from Ukraine and then say, oh, we investigated this? I don't know if we can trust them if they investigated in 2013. How do we know? You know, I'd like for somebody to inspect that and find out if it's true they really investigated them at that time, or they just got some notes from the Ukraine when the Ukrainian officials dug into the campaign manager for Donald Trump, trying to look for dirt, which it's a well-known fact they did that, even though Democrats won't admit it. Now, what do we do with all this information? Well, number one, thank Daphne Barak for coming back on and giving us some inside views and stories. She knows these people, has contacted, worked with them. Like I said, wrote the book about Rick Gates and the Robert Mueller probe, what it resolved around Rick Gates, and that book is To Plea or Not to Plea. We'll put a link right up on a website of this show. You can check on that. And also, she gave us that story about Mitt Romney and Donald Trump before the convention, the Republican National Convention. Remember, Mitt Romney was the previous flag bearer for the Republican Party. He was the standard bearer in 2012. He fell short of beating Barack Obama, and Barack Obama was reelected. But the standard bearer in 2012 would not be recognized at the 2016 Republican National Convention, would not even talk to the Republican nominee. And eventually they did. He was interviewed, Mitt Romney's were interviewed for possible Secretary of State. Priebus, the RNC chairman, had tried to get that together after the election, and of course Romney did not get that. But this event that Rick Gates had told Daphne for her book, that it seemed like they would just go round and round, Mitt Romney and Donald Trump. And it's a sad funny that Mitt Romney he had to be the only Republican in the House or Senate to vote for one of the impeachment articles. Just could not let it go. And in fact, I'm going to play a clip, but before I play this clip, I played it last week, just a minute or two of Donald Trump talking about what he thought of that. So I'm going to play that clip. But let me remind you, you're listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You're listening to us right here on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. We're glad to have you. This is election season. Crazy things going on. We got new listeners who have not listened to us before, so thank you for listening to us. Every Monday morning, get a new show, and there are plenty of archive shows. Go back and look at the headlines, the titles, and pick out some of the archive shows. Love for you to listen to that right on webtalkradio.net. And also, we're going to talk some about the Democratic race for the nomination for the Democratic Party or the Socialist Party. What's it going to be? Well, we're going to talk about this after we hear this clip from President Trump at one of his rallies talking about Mitt Romney. Take a listen.
So we're having great polls. You're seeing the polls, except for some of the fake ones. And if I was treated fairly, meaning if you were treated fairly by the fake news, we'd be up 20 points higher in the polls. There wouldn't even be a competitive election. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be competitive, but I actually think we're going to win by a lot, just like we did last time. But I really believe we'd be up 20 points. I mean, all they do is negative, phony stuff. Russia. The impeachment hoax. That's a hoax. But, you know, we had great support from the Republican Party. In the House, it was 197 to nothing. And in the Senate, it was 52 and a half to a half. You know what the half was? A half-wit.
You know, I still can't get over it. I've mentioned it several times. Long-time listeners will know it. James Comey, Jim Comey, former FBI director, was fired by Trump. But he said he knew he couldn't ever trust Trump because Trump never laughed. If James Comey said that, he has never been to a Trump rally. He does not understand the President of the United States because Donald Trump can make you laugh. That's just funny. Half-wit, where the half came from, that voted the Republican half-wit, that voted for a half article impeachment. Anyway, it's just funny. Now, we do have a book. Daphne got her book, The Plea or Not the Plea, and also right on the front page of our website here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. There's a book called Bedrock Truth. That's the book I wrote with Dr. Alveda King, and a niece of Martin Luther King Jr. and Dr. Alex McFarland. You haven't got that book, please get it. It tells you the bedrock truths this nation is built on and what we need to do to fortify those bedrock truths. Now, let's talk some about the Democrats. What a mess. I mean, who could have ever designed this if you were a Republican, that Bernie Sanders, Crazy Bernie, would take the lead and would have a chance to slam dunk in the Super Tuesday when California and Texas are both voting with a bunch of other states. And why did the Democrats do this? Not sure, but now they are scared to death that Bernie Sanders can run away with delegates if the people want the nomination, if they don't thin out. Why? Because you got Bloomberg, of all the money he could spend and never run out of money. I mean, he has got unlimited money, and he's spending huge in Texas and California and states where the other candidates have maybe some teams on the ground, but they don't have the money for all the TV stations and ads and newspapers and Facebook and all the different places they're putting ads on. And guess what? They got another billionaire, Tom Steyer, and then he was in a Democratic debate before the South Carolina primary. Didn't do much, but he was there, and he spent a lot of money. He's got a big budget. But guess who doesn't? All these different ones running are still in there. Klobuchar, you got Pocahontas, and Buttigieg, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the former vice president, the most name recognition, a guy that was leading all the polls, the national polls, for months and months and months, and he's just trying to hang in there. So nobody could have designed this. Nobody could have designed this to play into the hands of Bernie Sanders, where a socialist would win the nomination for the Democratic Party to be the standard bearer, a socialist. So how's Super Tuesday going to shape out this week? Very important. Everybody's watching it. But let's play. This is a little bit from the Laura Ingraham Show as they were talking about the debate last week in South Carolina. Let's take a listen to this clip, and then we'll finish up the show. Hey, new listeners, hang on. We got a great year. This is an election year, and you'll hear things here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics you won't hear anywhere else. Just like we had Daphne Barak, and we have guests sometime, we have fun sometime, we use clips, and so keep telling your friends and neighbors about Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics, because that's why we grow. And Rock Splitting Politics, we'll tweet out some things, or different shows, or Facebook page. You can go like us on Facebook, Dr. Ed Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Just go there. We put some things on there that you might find entertaining and educational, and so we can do more on that page than what we do every week on radio. So listen, stay in touch, and take a listen to this clip from Fox News' Laura Ingraham Show.
If you keep on going, we will elect Bernie. Bernie will lose to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump and the House and the Senate and some of the state houses will all go red.
If we cannot pull this party together, if we go to one of those extremes, we take a terrible risk.
of re-electing Donald Trump.
Not only is this a way to get Donald Trump reelected, we got a House to worry about. We got a Senate to worry about.
And they're all raising their hand all the time. It's class time. Joining me now, Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary, Fox News contributor, along with Chris Hahn, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, and pollster Frank Luntz. Ari, your big takeaway tonight, you watched.
Well, my big takeaway from a Democratic point of view is that they survived. Nobody really bombed this time. Bloomberg bombed last time. He didn't bomb this time, so he's kind of saved himself to fight for Super Tuesday. Biden actually did decently. He came across as somewhat articulate, somewhat with energy. It was a different Joe Biden tonight, which is huge for him on the eve of South Carolina. But face it, Laura, it's a three-way race. It's Bernie, Bloomberg, and Sanders.
When you look at the way this is going, Chris, now, doesn't it seem that after New Hampshire it became fairly clear who the three were going to be? I mean, Ari's right. It's down to those three. Tom Steyer is just blathering up there. And, Klobuchar, she was very intent on what she was saying. And Buttigieg tried to be very earnest. But none of those guys none of those people are going to be president. So they're just making it more likely that Bernie becomes the ultimate nominee. I'm going to stick to what I said weeks ago on this, that if you don't drop out and coalesce behind one alternative to Bernie, Bernie's going to run away with this. This will be over by, first week, second week of March.
Now, as Laura gave her insights, Doc Holliday just has to remind everybody, hey, I talked about the same thing on last week's show a little bit, even going back to the 2016 Republican nomination when Donald Trump was starting to break out. And nobody thought, well, Donald Trump's not going to win this thing. And he was. But there was a time when Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio could have teamed together and say, hey, let's pool together and we can defeat Donald Trump. We can get together and do it. And they may have been strong enough. But they didn't do it. It just doesn't happen. I mean, how do you go full throttle and have a chance for the nomination and then you want to just be second fiddle to someone else? It just doesn't seem to happen when you run for president. You go everything you got, except for maybe Mike Bloomberg. He's going with all his money. But like I think I heard Rush Limbaugh say, he doesn't have the fire in the belly. If you want to be president of the United States, you got to have some fire in your belly. You got to want it, and they got to see it in your eyes as you speak out like Crazy Bernie. He wants to be president. Hey, you knew Donald Trump wanted to be president of the United States. He had the fire in the belly. He was on the road. He's flying everywhere. And that's why he beat Hillary Clinton, because he was a maniac when it came to going from place to place to place to place. He didn't slow down. And what energy. And that's what it takes. And Michael Bloomberg has not exhibited that. I mean, you can tell anybody to buy a bunch of ads and polish ads, but you got to have some fire in the belly. Hey, let's see what Laura has to say now, and then we'll finish up the show real quick.
So, yeah, I mean, Bernie is definitely in the driver's seat. I agree with you on that. However, what Biden did tonight might help him. He took a nice attack on Steyer on the private prison investment. And if he could back that up with ads, that could cut into what Steyer has done to him in South Carolina. If you look at the polls in South Carolina, he's not really losing ground because Bernie's gaining ground. He lost a lot of ground to Steyer, who's made an overwhelming investment in South Carolina as his last stand state. So what Biden did tonight was very strategic. He had a good debate. And who knows, maybe this can help him have a bigger margin of victory on Saturday in South Carolina and propel him into Super Tuesday as a real contender.
I just loved how Biden did everything in the Obama administration. It was basically all his idea all night long. It was like, well, I did that. Well, Barack did. It was hilarious. I mean, I don't think Barack probably gave him much except Girl Scout pinning ceremonies or something. I don't know what he gave Biden, but he took credit for all of it.
And Laura, you forgot, Barack Obama gave him the Ukraine and China to take care of. And boy, did he ever take care of it. At least Hunter racked up there, didn't he? Oh, well. We have come to the close of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics for this week. And wow, let's see. Next week we'll be talking about what happens after Super Tuesday. It's going on this week. If you're a Democrat, get out and vote. We want everybody to vote, participate in the democracy. And what we will see is the accumulation of the most Democrats. Who are they going to accumulate behind? Is it going to continue to be Bernie Sanders? And will we get enough delegates to win a nomination on the first vote? Because if he doesn't, knives are going to come out. Did you see that movie, Knives Out? Well, the Hollywood version, Knives Out. It may be that when it comes to the Democratic nomination. I'm talking about politically. No, let's don't anybody claim me of wanting violence. I'm just saying politically, the knives are coming out, and we'll see who survives this race for the Democratic nomination. Very, very interesting. A little scary. Could a socialist become the president of the United States and beat Donald Trump? Wow. Have you thought of that? You let that sink in? Will that make you work harder to make sure not only Trump wins, but the Republicans get the House and keep the Senate with bigger numbers? Very, very important election we're coming into, maybe the most important ever. You hear that every 4 years, but when you look at it, it really is. So next week we'll continue on. We'll talk about what happened in Super Tuesday and great interviews. We'll continue to have those. Wasn't Daphne Barak just wonderful? I mean, have you heard that anywhere else? But you heard it right here. Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember to listen again next week for another edition of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You can order Ed's new book, Bedrock Truths, by clicking on the book cover right in front of you on the screen, or visit DocHolliday.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.